You just have a sense of how to use AI assisted tools to do it. Um, I don't know, Alec, how this. Oh wait, I'm sharing my screen, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Sorry, it doesn't have the red outline. Um, I don't know how to conduct this format. So if you have questions or you think I'm totally full of BS, please feel free to interject. I want these experiences to be Socratic, which is basically the five whys. And in my line of work, I was thinking about five whys and I was like, well, I only have three. Like, why do I believe this? Why does it benefit me? And why might I be wrong? So those are like my three important whys.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm candidly coming into this with like, and I've told you this, like the most baseline knowledge of coding possible. So this is purely a learning exercise for me, and whatever format you're most comfortable in, I'm all for, and I will certainly interject and ask questions, kind of along the way. And since it's if it's just me, I want to be cognizant of the time commitment from you guys here. Like we
Yeah,
can go
it's
through this
fine.
as
We could do
quickly
this in an
as you guys
hour.
want.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I
Cool.
mean, I have it on the calendar for 90 minutes. I'm exploring it. I don't know what it will become in terms of a format. I'm not like a master facilitator or something. I talk about these mental models in conversation constantly. And so they're actually quite important to me, right? Like I'm beginning to base my life on this, well, not beginning to, like I have based my life on many of these tenets. And so I'm more or less living this life.
Yeah. Love
Um,
it.
the
On
next
the
mental,
I was
sure.
just going to say on the specialization is for insects. I don't know if you've ever read the book Range by David Epstein, but that's what triggered in my head. It's a good one, just about generalists living in a specialist world, I think is what they call it, and it's like the different types of systems. Good book, very
I
relevant,
mean,
I
that
think.
that might be the guy who said it.
Oh, could be.
Yeah,
No, it was
Specializations for
David Epstein. There you
Instincts,
go.
David
Yeah,
Epstein, American journalist, right?
perfect. That's exactly who was
Um,
coming to my mind. Yeah.
yeah. So I'm not super off. And I think I think the specializations for insects is like really important mental model to call out because so many people who are afraid of AI taking whatever it is they do, they're basically specialists and they don't know it. And so, like, hey, if you're a specialist IC doing work in a corporation, that might be a dead end and that might be okay. But the reality is that nobody's going to send you a memo that says, hey, now you're an entrepreneur. You need to go out and be a generalist and look to solve multi sort of disciplinary problems. And
Hmm.
so, in my service to people, right, I constantly talking to people who are either managers of specialist ICs or are specialist ICs themselves. And I'm like, okay, look, here's some perspective on things that I believe could be relevant to you. Tailored, actually, we don't know if we have a bullet point here. Tailored suits required. I think maybe Alec, we talked a little bit about this one when you were at the Red Fridge. Do you wear tailored suits?
I do. Yeah.
I that's funny. I don't. I was in Hong Kong a lot when I was in the Navy though, and they always like try to get you to buy tailored suits. And I bought a bunch of very expensive Canali suits at business school that I have never worn. They're
Good for
probably
you. I prefer I didn't. Yeah.
sitting in my closet that I wanted to wear them. I was like, these things make me look like, $1 million. Where's the Ferrari? And, crickets chirping. Anyways, tailored suits required is a mental model I think that would help people understand that as AI driven coding massively brings down the cost of like throwaway engineering, organizations from an operational and logistics perspective, customer service, like every little nook and cranny in the past that organizations allowed external cloud software or allowed like an operations team of humans to just sort of deal with any problems. I think the new paradigm is that AI-driven coding should make it so cheap and easy to build an operational stack that is like 99.9% exactly the business that you want to run and the way you want it to be run, right? Like if you have a sales process and you want to do something custom related to that sales process, you don't really need to go out and search for a vendor. You can basically go to a coding platform and be like, look, I have problems A, B, and C. Here's data connections to whatever systems you need. Generate a solution to that problem. And it's kind of the equivalent of going into a workshop and building a paper mache giant or something and pushing that paper mache giant out onto the front patio of your business. When in the past, those paper mache giants weren't very good, but now they're getting incredibly good. And they don't need to be made out of high quality materials. They just need to fulfill a process. And I'm not saying that all products will be subject to this. In fact, I think products will have to get even better. But I think anybody orchestrating a business, doing sales ops or customer ops or logistics ops, like, hey, it's like taking Zapier and multiplying it by 100, right? AI driven coding. And if people are thinking in terms of, well, what assemblage of cloud services should I be paying for? I think that's going to not be the right path to be on. I think the right path to be on will be like, what exact process serves my customers? How do we quickly create that process in iterating until you're just like have a real tight feedback loop between how AI builds systems and the feedback that you're getting from customers. It's basically like joining two feedback loops. I'm copying and pasting. Good devs are lazy devs. Now you too are a lazy dev. Have you ever heard anybody say this, Alec? Like good devs are lazy?
No.
Let's see. Let's see. Who originally said good developers are a little lazy? Um, there's a very famous quote by Bill Gates. I choose a lazy person to do a hard job because a lazy person will find an easy way to do it. I love that, right? Um, so this is like a very common computer sciencey sort of view towards life. If somebody asks you to do something, hey, fill in this spreadsheet, or hey, go through these documents and find all the ones marked with blue. And you give that to a programmer is going to be like, I don't want to do the work. And they'll figure out an algorithm to do that work for them. And so if you give a problem to a computer programmer and their first like instinct is to just go manually do everything 1,000 times, you're like, you're off track. And Bill Gates is very intelligent in his observation that like, continue to be lazy, figure out how to offload work to machinery. And so that tended to be a mantra that, in my opinion, was isolated to the developer communities. And I think there's evidence of this when, like on the show Silicon Valley, right? Like I remember which there's like two of the guys on the show, they're constantly sitting around playing video games and doing all their work like in the last minute. And there's like all these jokes around how they're like really lazy and pampered. And that has very much been unique to programmers. And I think that as AI comes online, this mentality will be pushed to all members of an organization from a skill point of view because the scale, the scope of problems being solved at internet scale is so big that everything basically will require an algorithmic approach. And so even if you're in sales or you're in ops or marketing or customer experience or whatever, the sort of like 60s mentality, and you hear this actually in prospecting all the time. Like, oh, it's a numbers game. If I just keep cranking numbers through the system, eventually I'll like make a conversion and everything will work, which I actually think is a very failing perspective when you think about how much data and how much work there is to do out on the internet. Like, sure, in the 60s and 70s and 80s, if you called 100 people, you'd probably get one to convert. But like with AI reaching everybody on the planet right now, the denominator in a lot of these various workload problems can be like billions, hundreds of millions to billions. And there's no way to just do the organic next step and be successful. You have to find an algorithmic way to pretty much do everything. And so, you know, if you thought developers were lazy, you were probably right. And now our job is also to be lazy a little bit, to figure out smart ways to continue to be lazy, as opposed to attempting to do all the work ourselves. I will assume no questions is good questions. Um, uh, Farnham, the Lollapalooza effect, and the theory of relativity. This one is terribly well. This one is terrible. Actually, this probably could eventually become a sub statement under here. But Farnham is the street, I believe, that Berkshire Hathaway was on. The Lollapalooza effect is what Charlie Munger describes as when you have multiple models and multiple systems interacting with each other, that predicting what's going to happen is basically impossible. And the theory of relativity, right? Like we know about Einstein's work and the scientists and all that stuff. And there's like this really interesting analogy that helped. Like we might have a sense of things are relative, but by studying the actual theory of relativity in a mental models book, right? This book right here, I read an analogy about the theory of like you could tell me, yeah, do people have different points of view? And I'd be like, yes, they have very relative points of view. That's a fact. But it was reading about the model that gave me an incredible understanding of how different that is. There's an analogy of two people sitting on the same train, and the train is struck at the same time by lightning. And depending on where a person is sitting on that train, they might actually believe that the lightning struck at two different times, when in reality it struck at the same time. And so by studying mental models, it can give us a much deeper understanding of how things happen. And a lot of people don't directly study mental models. And so kind of coming back to this specialization is still for insects, literally intentionally studying mental models is an incredibly high value use of time, which I think it was all very rare historically that people would study mental models. I don't know. Do you
Was
study
that
mental models, Alec
do
or Lucas?
I wouldn't say that I'm a student of mental models, but I definitely pay attention to them and am curious and interested about them. Was that book a Shane Parrish book?
It was. How do you
Yeah.
know all the you're getting all my authors like right down the list?
I guess we're just on the same reading list. I don't know. Um, yeah, I actually haven't read that. I've listened to Shane Parrish's podcast in the past, and I'm on his email distribution, but I haven't read that book yet. So maybe I need to pick it up.
It's funny. I've had it sitting here for a long time. I think there are subtleties to studying mental models. I think that if you can study people's stories that highlight mental models, it's actually more useful than studying the mental models themselves, because it's the stories and the emotional context of the stories that helps us remember, right? Like if you take a book and you pack like 30 mental models in it, it's like, great, I can read all 30, but I might forget. But like listening to the Founders podcast, the stories that I hear about the founders and the mental models that keep resurfacing between the founders makes my learning of those mental models so much stronger.
Mm. Yeah, super interesting.
Okay, paradox of two fast cars with no speedometers. Um, right. So person A, or there's a person in a garage and he's got a car and he's working on it. And someone drives up and they're like, "Hey, dude, buy this other car that's faster." And the guy in the garage is like, "Oh, I would love to have a faster car." And he looks down at his car and he's like, "Wait, there's no speedometer on this car. I don't know how fast it goes." And he asks the guy, he's like, "Hey, does your car have a speedometer? How fast does it go?" And the other guy is like, looks down, he's like, "Oh, my car also doesn't have a speedometer, right? So how can we have a conversation about which car is faster if there's no speedometer?"
You race.
Exactly, maybe. That's a good answer. I think this is like a critical mental model, in my opinion, as everybody is talking about replacement, right? We're talking about replacement for things that we don't fully understand. And that I think is a kind of a slippery place to be. I think there are lots of other value propositions for using AI that aren't being explored in this moment. And I think when particularly a consultant or a company selling a tool is like, "Hey, I have this thing that is way better than the thing that you have," the immediate first answer or the first question in my book is like, "Well, how are we measuring these things? How are we measuring these systems?" And like I tend to trust people who make defensible statements, which means if you're asking me to replace something and you yourself don't know how to measure each thing, that immediately like reduces a person's credibility in my book. If they were like, "Hey, here are some attributes that we've been paying attention to that are better," right? Like, "Oh, it generates less buggy code, or it generates code faster, or it does something that is measurable." But I think a lot of what's being talked about in the AI world right now is about replacing things based on speed when there are no speedometers.
Mm.
It's like
And it's
we
funny.
need to go ahead.
No, no, tell me.
Um, I was saying it's like we need to establish some sort of metrics on what we are building to like prove the quality we're or we're building something effective, right? Something like that.
Yeah, absolutely. Hi, David, are you there?
I am.
How you doing today?
Great. And you?
Great. We met in Oregon, right?
Yeah,
Had
yeah, yeah.
coffee together?
Are you no longer in Bend?
No, I moved to Austin last May. So actually I've been in Austin for a year now.
Wow.
Um, we're about we're 20 minutes ish into the mental models. I'll hopefully finish it up quick and we'll switch gears to some AI driven coding. Um,
Please do your
I
thing. I just want to learn, so don't let me interrupt.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Have you built anything with AI coding agents?
No, I mean I've used Cursor but never built anything. So yeah, I really don't know much about coding, but trying to learn and love it.
Awesome. So the next mental model is no yelling in the kitchen. And again, all these mental models relate back to this specialization and multidisciplinary nature of everything. So I'm learning a lot by talking about this stuff out loud. Anyways, no yelling in the kitchen. I was at a great talk by Brian Chesky at Figma Config a couple summers ago, and he said two things that I thought were pretty spot on. He said, if salespeople, if or like you can judge a kitchen by if front of house goes into the kitchen and gets yelled at, that's kind of a dysfunctional restaurant. And in the tech world, if salespeople go into the engineering, kitchen and they get yelled at to leave, then you have a dysfunctional organization. And Brian Chesky also said that if you're running a tech company and the CEO is the head of product at all times, because it's the CEO's understanding of the customer and the product that come together to drive the organization. And I think this whole no yelling in the kitchen mental model is really critical because, and I think you see this also in Naval Ravikant's writing, that innovative creativity is going to come from relatively small teams that are just cooperating intensely across all the skill areas, which means back to my some of my original statements, if you're a salesperson, it pays dividends to try to build things with AI coding tools. If you're an engineer who has engineering down pat, spend some time outside of the engineering box and try to sell whatever it is your company makes and get a sense of like how hard it is to sell and how difficult customer problems are, and honestly, how difficult it is to nail UX, right? Like we can obsess about out computational efficiency in on a laptop when we're writing an algorithm, but watching software and watching people use software, nailing user experience is really difficult. And so it's that bi-directional flow of behavior from front of house to back of house and back of house to front of house that will be a sort of a defining organizational attribute going forward.
John, you've seen more tech companies and been inside of more tech companies than I have, but why do you think that uh, those channels aren't? Why is there yelling typically, or why does yelling exist?
Um, in the sort of in the original analogy, I think it has a lot to do with cooks having a belief that they are the ones who know how to do everything. And it's a mix of them being the ones that know how to do everything, therefore nobody else's opinion matters, but also the time constraints and the pressure that the kitchen is under to deliver everything. So I think when you put those two together, it can make kitchens very volatile. And I think in tech environments, I probably it has a fair amount to do with engineering developing somewhat of an ivory tower in so much as oh, all like a lot of engineering culture is about demonstrating how smart you are. It's about passing really hard engineering interviews. It's about like sort of displaying a degree of like intellectual dominance over other people. And so when you get too many of those people onto one team, and then historically in startups, like, and I'm going to generalize here a little bit, and I think it's okay to generalize when if you're clear on it. And by the way, the point of data science is to generalize, but to generalize about some startups and even some mature organizations, sales can be one of those functional areas that people get into without a lot of education, right? You can just be like, I'm motivated. I'm going to go into sales. I'm going to learn how to sell things. And so when you pair up the behavior of people who aren't necessarily trained in any particular area, they're just talking about what they observe. And what they observe might actually be illogical because real life is very illogical. And you present that to a group of engineers who believe that they already know everything there is to know. I think it can create really strong contrast lines around, hey, I already know what I need to know. You don't need to be telling me what to do, or you don't need to be
Mm.
second guessing me about how I'm doing what I'm doing. And like these are crazy broad generalizations, but like these generalizations exist in the show Silicon Valley. And that show is, I think, a pretty decent snapshot of real life. So I'm not saying all situations adhere to the generalization, but good mental models are applicable across a lot of environments. So that's basically like picking some logical ideas and generalizing them to a lot of situations. It doesn't necessarily mean that I think things can't be different or that they are not sometimes different. And I have also been told that I have a phenomenally world-class ability to update my perception of something. And that is kind of like evolving a generalization. Sure, yesterday I believed one thing, today I got some new information, and tomorrow I wake up with a new worldview. And like I have been told by very smart people that I have an incredible ability to update my internal models about how things work and why they do. And I think that comes from like developing very intentional language around what the mental model is.
Hmm.
David, I don't know if that's a reasonable answer. I'm part rambling, part storyteller, part I don't know, entertainer, I guess. Okay. Oh, I want to talk about this one. This is SEBS, not SaaS. So software enabled by services, not software as a service. We hear software as a service, but like nobody ever woke up wanting to buy more software, right? People wake up wanting problems to be solved. And so if you look at Mark Andreessen's quote that software is eating the world, I think that was very true. And now AI is eating software. What is going to be left are the services that we provide. And so the people that are going to win are the ones that focus on the service being provided and a little bit less so on the software being built, right? Software is like a pill, right? We don't take pills because we like pills inherently. We take pills because they usually contain chemicals that solve a problem for us, right? If there was another way to have the problem solved, we would skip the pills, right? And so like the tech industry, I think especially in the last like 5 or 10 years, there's just like a lot of software creep. It's just like build, build, build more software. And AI will basically make it possible for almost any type of software to be built or replicated. So it is not the software that is valuable to us, it's the service that the software provides. And that leads us back to a services oriented mindset. In fact, I recorded a session a week and a half ago with a CEO who got her start. Her first educational experiences was at Cornell in the hotel and restaurant management program. And now she's like a tech CEO. And it was like very refreshing to talk about how, like in her early days, she would help run hotels and events, and that led her into an events app. But like she learned at a fundamental level what it was like to solve a person's problem, sort of irrespective of format or mode or whatever, right? Whether or not the job is to deploy code or to alert somebody to an error or to open the doorbell or to do, any of the myriad things that software can do, people pay to, generally speaking, have problems solved, right? They're paying for services rendered. They don't tend to care that much about the software. And I think this will be incredibly important as the cost of software development drops, the cost of software replication drops. The hard part is understanding what problems people want solved. Um, so then I have two more models that I don't have very good notes on. Cooperate versus replicate. I think we've kind of talked about this indirectly. Um, the future there's actually really, I don't know if you've read this book, Alec. This is another great one. The Second Machine Age by Eric Brynjolfsson and Andrew McAfee. And
No.
they talk a lot about, these guys are like AI researchers before LLM tech hit. And they really interestingly, they diagram competition between like smartest humans and weak humans. Smart humans tend to win. Smartest AI models with smartest humans, the smartest AI models tend to win. And it gets really interesting when you pair average humans with average AI models against fastest AI models or smartest humans. The average humans with average tech tend to outperform either the smartest human or the smartest AI a lot. And the rationale behind that, like I don't exactly remember their rationale. My rationale has a bit to do with the way humans cooperate and the way humans, through making mistakes and through various sort of different points of view come up with very different ideas about doing things. And that tends to be an effective way to compete. And so a lot of our jobs, or at least my jobs in building systems, is building systems where humans and AIs cooperate. It's not necessarily one or the other. And I think that coming back to services enabled by software, not software as a service, services enabled by software is like a team where two or three people and two or three AI systems all work together to provide a service. And that is a very difficult service to replicate because like any service that's pure machine, like an LLM, like the LLMs are all kind of equivalent at this point, right? Like, oh, they're competing on price or they're competing on token inputs or they're competing on how much they've been, data they've been trained on. They're still very similar in the way that they're used. It's like how you insert the LLMs into a customer service team. How do you get everybody cooperating together that makes it really interesting and very difficult to replicate? All right. So I'm going to pause. I think that's all the mental model chit chat I'm going to go through. Do you guys want me to summarize anything? Do you have any questions? David, is that a Lhasa Apso? Does your Lhasa Apso have any questions for me?
Jitsu.
Shih
No,
Tzu.
I believe she's all right. But will this recording be available?
Yes. I mean, I generally speaking, like record these. I hadn't really developed a game plan for what I was going to do with today because it's such a new sort of style for me. But yeah, I have tons of other things posted and I would post this for you if you would like
Oh,
to. I was thinking I would
what
break it
I
into
missed?
two sections.